Hello, my name is Aaron Doyle, and during breakfast with my family, over soup that smelled too familiar, I got a text that changed everything. Get up and leave. Don't tell your brother. I didn't drink it. I didn't speak. I just watched. By the end of the meal, I knew my sister had poisoned more than food. They erased me from the will, tampered with my father's policy, forged my signature, and called it protecting the family name. But what do you do when your own mother helps cover it all up? What happens when your brother watches and does nothing? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when the quiet one stops pretending and starts recording. You want to know what was really in that soup? Sunday mornings in Atlanta have a certain stillness, even when the city hums just a few blocks away. I could hear it faintly outside my father's old house, the muted rush of cars, a bird calling somewhere in the dogwood tree, the sound of a lawnmower far off. Inside, though, everything was arranged to look like harmony. It was 9:45 a.m., and the dining room table gleamed with silverware polished to a mirror shine. A platter of biscuits sat on a lace doily. Coffee steamed in a heavy ceramic pot. It looked, at first glance, like the kind of breakfast people dream of coming home to. I hadn't been home in months. The last time I'd been invited back, the air had been just as sweet, but the glances across the table were sharper than the cutlery. This time, I came because Clarice had called and said, "It would be nice for everyone to see you again." She had said it slowly, like she was reciting a line from a play. I came anyway. Some part of me still wanted to believe in family, in the kind of homecoming you see in movies. But as I stepped into the dining room, I could feel a cold current under the surface. Isolde, my older sister, was already at the table. Her smile stretched just a fraction too wide when she saw me, like she'd rehearsed in the mirror. She wore a pale green dress that matched the napkins she had folded into little fans. "Look who decided to show up," she said brightly. Harlan sat across from her, hunched over his phone, thumb moving in tiny, repetitive motions. He didn't look up when I pulled out a chair. Clarice, our aunt and self-appointed mediator, poured orange juice into tall glasses. She murmured something about how good it was to have everyone together, but her eyes flicked from Isolde to me like she was tracking an invisible tennis match. I smoothed my hands over my skirt and sat down. Every plate was perfectly centered, every knife and fork lined up with military precision. But the warmth was missing. It was the kind of hospitality you read about in magazines, but when you're sitting in it, you notice how silent it is, how calculated. I caught Isolde glancing at me, then at Harlan, then back at me, as if measuring my reactions. She stood and picked up the soup pot herself. "You remember this," she said, her voice rich and slow, "just like Mom used to make." She ladled steaming portions into each bowl with a kind of ceremony. "Our childhood in a bowl," she added with a small laugh. Her tone was meant to be light, but something about it made my stomach tighten. The smell rose up warm and heavy. Underneath the scent of chicken and herbs, there was a faint metallic edge I couldn't place. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was just on guard because I'd been burned before. Harlan pushed his bowl slightly away without looking at it. Clarice took a polite spoonful and nodded. I wrapped my fingers around the edge of my spoon. My memories of this soup were tied to afternoons when Mom was alive, when laughter filled the kitchen instead of whispered phone calls. That made it harder to believe my own instincts, harder to trust the flicker of warning at the back of my throat. My phone vibrated against my thigh, a soft buzz I almost didn't feel. I glanced down. A new message had appeared on the lock screen. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. My thumb slid over the glass almost without thinking. The words stared up at me, stark and plain. "Get up and leave. Don't tell your brother." For a second, everything slowed. The room, the clinking of spoons, the smell of bread, it all receded. My heart knocked hard once, then again like it wanted out. I read the message twice, then a third time. I kept my face still, eyes on my bowl. Someone had texted me at exactly the moment I was about to eat. Someone who knew enough to tell me to keep Harlan out of it. My first instinct was to stand up and demand to know what was going on, but years of learning how to survive this family kept me anchored. Instead, I laid the spoon down gently. I could feel Isolde's eyes on me. "Everything okay?" she asked too quickly. I smiled faintly. "Just a work thing," I said. My voice sounded normal, which was a small miracle. Inside, my thoughts were running fast. Who sent this? Why now? And why warn me about the soup? I let my fingers drift over the napkin, pretending to adjust it, while my other hand tipped a small spoonful of broth into its folds. The fabric absorbed it silently. Clarice kept chatting about the church fundraiser. Harlan scrolled. Isolde's smile didn't move. I needed to get out without making a scene. "This is really good," I said softly, pushing back my chair a little. "I'm just going to freshen up before we dig in. Long drive this morning." Isolde tilted her head, all sugar. "Sure. Take your time." The hallway outside the dining room felt cooler, like stepping out of a heated pool. I moved slowly at first, then quicker once I was out of sight. Upstairs, the guest bathroom was exactly as I remembered. White tile, a window with a view of the backyard, a faint smell of lavender. I shut the door and turned the lock. Only then did I pull the phone back out and open the message again. My hands weren't shaking, but my breath came shallow. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly, the screen lighting up before I could even lower the phone. "Someone who doesn't want to see you disappear." I stared at the words until they blurred. In my other hand, the napkin felt damp and heavy. I unfolded it and looked at the small stains spreading across the fabric, a darker shadow against the white. My fingers trembled slightly now, not from fear exactly, but from a cold, precise recognition. Whatever game was being played at that table, I was already a move behind. And somebody out there had just given me my first clue. I wiped my hands dry on the towel hanging by the sink and let the damp fabric anchor me for a heartbeat. The words on my phone still glowed like a wound. "Why can't I tell Harlan?" I whispered into the quiet bathroom, as if the phone could answer. No reply came. I tapped the screen again. Nothing. The same blank bubble stared back at me. Whoever had sent the warning had gone dark. My pulse slowed enough for me to think, if they were close enough to know what was in the soup, they were close enough to see me. Maybe even inside this house. I tried tracing the number, a reflex from my consulting days. The call log showed no name, no address, just an empty string that screamed, "Burner." No use. My instincts clicked in the way they used to when I walked into a client boardroom and sensed a trap. Something here wasn't just off, it was deliberate. I opened the bathroom drawer, found a half-empty box of Ziploc bags, and slipped the damp napkin inside. Air sealed, folded, hidden in my tote. My reflection stared back from the mirror. Hair neat, lipstick still even, eyes too sharp to pass for casual. "Don't panic," I murmured to myself. "Just watch. Just listen." When I stepped back into the hallway, the house felt heavier. The murmur of voices floated from the dining room. I tucked the phone into my pocket, straightened my shoulders, and walked back in as if nothing had happened. The chairs hadn't moved. The bowls still steamed. Isolde looked up with that same serene smile. "Feel better?" she asked, voice coated with honey. I nodded once, sliding back into my seat. Harlan was still scrolling, expression flat. Clarice poured more coffee, her eyes flicking over me, unreadable. Then, as Mavis passed behind me with a tray of fresh rolls, our eyes met. Just a moment, barely longer than a blink, but it landed like a pebble in water. There was something in her look I hadn't seen before, a flicker of concern, maybe guilt, maybe a warning. Her lips pressed together as if holding back words. My breath caught. Somebody else knew. Somebody who'd stayed silent until now. I picked up my spoon but didn't eat. "It's nice of you to make this," I said, glancing at Isolde. "Takes time." "Anything for family," she answered, perfectly pleasant. "We all deserve a little comfort, don't we?" I smiled faintly. "Comfort's good. Honesty's better." She tilted her head, puzzled, but her knuckles whitened on the ladle. When the plates were cleared, I offered to help. "You don't have to," Clarice said sweetly. You're a guest. Then let me feel useful, I said, rising before anyone could stop me. I followed Mavis into the kitchen. She didn't speak, just handed me a towel to dry dishes. The normalcy of the task steadied me. But out of the corner of my eye, I caught her glancing toward the hallway where the family photo wall hung. Later, with the kitchen mostly clean and the others absorbed in small talk, I drifted toward that wall. It had been part of my childhood, every milestone framed, every holiday recorded. My father's memorial photo had hung there for years. It used to show all of us standing together, a fragile moment of unity on the worst day of our lives. I knew the picture by heart, but now when I stopped before it, I blinked, looked again. My breath caught. My figure was gone. Not blurred, not shadowed, gone. Cropped out as if I'd never stood there. Isolde centered. Harlan solemn on one side. Clarice smiling faintly. Me erased. My stomach tightened. I reached up and touched the glass. Maybe they ordered the wrong version, I thought. Maybe it was a mistake. When did you have this reprinted? I asked aloud, trying to keep my tone neutral. Clarice appeared in the hall, drying her hands. Oh, Isolde had it done last month. Said it looked more balanced this way. Balanced. The word stuck in my throat. My hands trembled against the frame. I see. Clarice smiled, the kind of smile that closes doors. Don't take it personally, dear. Sometimes photos just need a little editing. I didn't answer. I just let my hand drop and stepped back. Editing. That was one word for it. I called it erasure. In the laundry room, away from the polished table and curated smiles, I found Mavis folding towels. She looked up as I entered. Her face softened, and for the first time that morning she spoke to me directly. Some things don't need to be said out loud, she murmured, eyes on the floor. But they need to be seen. I shut the door behind me. Have you seen something? She hesitated, then placed a warm hand on my shoulder. You know the truth. That's why they fear you. I studied her lined face, the kindness there shadowed by something like regret. Why didn't you tell me before? Because you wouldn't have believed me, she said simply. People don't believe until the room gets cold enough. Her words settled over me like dust. I nodded once. Thank you. As I turned to leave, she added quietly, Be careful what you drink, Miss Erin. Not everything in this house is what it seems. I froze mid-step. The hallway beyond seemed darker than before. I forced my legs to move, thanked her again, and walked back upstairs. My phone buzzed in my pocket. When I pulled it out, there wasn't another text, just a missed call from another unknown line. I stared at the screen, pulse steady now, not from calm, but from clarity. This wasn't paranoia. This was a pattern. Someone was watching, someone was warning, and someone else was trying to make me vanish without a word. Erin pressed play on the voicemail, not knowing it would change everything she thought she knew. A man's voice filled the quiet of the guest room, low and steady, but lined with something she hadn't heard since childhood. Fear. If you're hearing this, he began, it's because I don't trust anyone else. For a moment she thought it was a prank, some elaborate trick. But then he said her name the way only one person ever had. It was her father. Her fingers tightened around the phone as the message continued. Policy 8735. Look at it. Don't sign anything. Don't let them convince you you're imagining things. The voice cracked slightly before he regained control. I wanted to believe they would protect you after I was gone, but I've seen too much. Don't trust their smiles, Erin. Not all of them. Then silence. No goodbye. No explanation of how he knew. Only those few numbers. 8735. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet. My father had been gone almost a year. We'd all stood at his memorial, saying words about legacy and family, about staying strong. And all that time, he'd been recording warnings I never got to hear until now. My chest ached, but not from grief. It was something sharper, like the edges of a box opening inside me. I slipped the phone into my pocket, stood, and smoothed the bedspread. My reflection in the dresser mirror looked pale but steady. They wanted me confused. They'd trained me to doubt myself. That was ending now. I walked downstairs, phone tucked into my palm like a secret. The kitchen smelled of dish soap and coffee gone cold. Clarice stood at the counter rinsing cups, her back to me. For a moment, I couldn't make my mouth form the words about the voicemail. She turned, drying her hands on a towel, and smiled. "Didn't you like the soup?" she asked, tone sweet enough to rot teeth. I forced a small smile. Wasn't feeling well. She'd said softly. "It's always something with you, Aaron. You're too sensitive. That's why people struggle to connect with you." She said it like she was worried, but her eyes glinted like polished stone. I knew the script. It had worked on me since I was a teenager. Guilt by suggestion. Criticism dressed up as care. "I'm fine," I said evenly. "No, you're not," she countered, stepping closer. "You've always been dramatic. We're the ones who stayed. Isolde carried this family when you disappeared. We kept things afloat while you were off whatever you were doing. And now you come back acting like you're the victim." Her voice softened, but only to press the blade in deeper. "We're not the ones who left, Aaron. Maybe if you were a little more like Isolde, things would be smoother." The words landed like cold rain. I swallowed hard. "Isolde carried the family," I repeated slowly. "That's an interesting way to put it." I wanted to say more, but she raised a hand like a traffic cop. "I'm not going to argue with you," she said briskly. "We're done with that phase. You can either be part of this family, or you can keep standing on the sidelines complaining." She turned back to the sink as if I'd already left the room. I stayed there a moment, gripping the counter. The smell of lemon cleaner mixed with old coffee. My mind drifted back, flashbacks I hadn't invited flooding in any way. 17 years old, handing over my college savings because Isolde's tuition is an emergency, sweetie. 24, taking the blame when Harlan failed law school because you distracted him with your drama. I whispered under my breath. I was never supposed to succeed, was I? The kitchen was quiet except for the faucet. My grief turned into stillness. I excused myself and went upstairs again. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection looked like a stranger. I started naming what I felt, silently. Rage, shame, confusion, fear. And then something new, resolve. I pulled out my phone, opened a blank note, and typed, Policy 8735. Find lawyer. My thumb hovered before adding, no more giving in. Then I opened the message thread with the unknown number and typed, what do I need to know next? For a moment, nothing happened. I could hear the house settling around me, the creak of floorboards, the faint clink of dishes downstairs. My pulse matched the silence. Then the phone buzzed once. A new message. They're about to make their next move. Tonight. I stared at the screen, and instead of fear, a strange focus settled over me. This wasn't a test of nerves anymore. It was a test of preparation. Whoever was on the other end had given me enough breadcrumbs to know I wasn't crazy. I slipped the phone into my pocket, walked to the guest room, and closed the door. The lock clicked under my thumb. This time, I didn't feel afraid, just ready. The lock clicked into place behind me, a soft sound, but it felt like a seal between me and whatever performance was still unfolding downstairs. I didn't sleep. I stayed up, rereading the message, listening again to the voicemail from my father, watching the shadows crawl across the carpet as the hours slid past. By the time daylight began to filter through the curtains, I hadn't closed my eyes once. But I wasn't tired. I was calculating. The house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that invites calm, but the kind that made the walls feel thinner, the footsteps louder. A practiced stillness. A warning. I left the guest room a little before 8. The air was heavy with the smell of brewed coffee and toasted bread, but it didn't mask the tension that hung just beneath the surface. In the kitchen, Clarice and Isolde were already seated, sipping from mismatched mugs like they did this every morning without effort. The table was set again. Napkins folded, plates waiting. The only thing missing was Harlan.
Morning, I said.
Clarice smiled without looking up from her paper. Good morning, dear. Isolde's eyes flicked up for just a moment. Sleep okay? I nodded. Where's Harlan? Clarice answered without pause. Oh, he had to step out for a quick work call. You know how busy he is with that firm. Always something with contracts and deadlines. I hummed in acknowledgement, keeping my tone neutral. Inside, a string tightened. He wasn't working. He was moving. 2 nights ago, Harlan had borrowed my phone. Said he needed to check the weather because his app was glitching. I remember that moment so clearly now. He had smiled, said, "Just a sec," and kept his hand steady as he scrolled. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. But that same night, I got a login alert from an unrecognized device trying to access my cloud storage. I brushed it off, thinking it was an old tablet or maybe a sync error. Now it connected. He cloned my login. My brother, who once carried me home from the pool when I scraped my knee, had hacked into my files. Not by force. By familiarity. By expectation. That made it worse. I excused myself before breakfast was fully plated, said I had an email to check. No one stopped me. I climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately, and once inside the guest room, I didn't hesitate. I opened my laptop, connected to my private network, and pulled up the access logs. Multiple attempts from the same IP, this house's IP, had been made within the last 12 hours. I clicked through the log and felt my chest tighten. The file labeled ._policy_PDF was gone. Not moved. Not renamed. Deleted. I opened the trash folder.
Empty.
I sat there for a second, staring at the blank screen where the file had lived for years. My father's original life insurance policy. The one he had referenced in the voicemail. I had stored it in that cloud long before he passed, back when I was helping him scan and archive documents during one of his chemo recoveries. No one else knew it existed. And now it was gone. But I wasn't helpless. I picked up my phone and called Mitch, an old colleague from Charlotte who now worked in cybersecurity. When he answered, I skipped the pleasantries. I need a complete lockdown, I said. Transfer all my encrypted files to the offshore vault we set up last year. And I want to activate the honeypot on my public folder. He whistled low. You're finally using that thing?
Yeah.
And make sure every access attempt gets traced. Timestamped. Logged. Understood. You okay? No, I replied calmly. But I will be. I hung up and opened my backup drive. I re-uploaded all critical files into a dummy folder labeled Final Summary. Inside, I placed nothing but a tracker coded to mimic a real document but actually rigged to send me screenshots of every attempt to open it. Next, I activated screen recording on my phone and synced it to a secondary cloud. Every interaction, every message, every file touch would now be saved. I checked my camera watch, battery full, audio set to always on. Let them try me now. Later that evening, we gathered for dinner again. As if nothing had shifted. The table looked the same, the food similar. Roast chicken this time, with scalloped potatoes. Isolde poured wine. Clarice blessed the meal. I sat down across from an empty chair, one that remained vacant until halfway through the meal. Harlan walked in, flushed, tie askew. His hand was damp where it gripped his phone. He offered no explanation, just mumbled an apology and took his seat. I let him settle in. Let him eat a few bites. Then I looked at him. How was the call? I asked, voice smooth. He looked up startled.
Yeah.
Just some contract stuff. I nodded slowly. Didn't realize legal work required breaching someone's cloud storage. His fork froze midair. Clarice stopped cutting her chicken. Isolde's head snapped toward him like she'd been hit with a silent alarm. That's a serious accusation, Aaron, Clarice said, setting her fork down deliberately. Do you have proof? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. Then I stood, slow and steady, and let my eyes move across the table. Then let's make this official. Erin didn't raise her voice, but her decision cut through the room like broken glass. The clatter of silverware faded. The background hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. Even the ticking of the wall clock became sharp and deliberate. No one moved at first. Clarice's fingers tightened around her coffee mug. Isolde leaned back slightly, but her eyes stayed fixed on me, steady, unreadable, calculating. Clarice broke the silence first. You're just tired, honey. You always get dramatic when you're overwhelmed. Her tone was sweet on the surface, but sharp enough to slice skin underneath. I didn't blink. If you've done nothing wrong, I said evenly, you won't mind if I call someone, right? A flicker crossed Clarice's face, barely there, gone before most people would notice. Isolde didn't speak, but the corners of her lips lifted, almost imperceptibly, like she'd been waiting for this moment. The rest of dinner dragged on with mechanical politeness. I chewed slowly, my fork deliberate, my phone silent in my lap. By the time dessert was offered, I excused myself, saying I had an early morning call. Clarice only nodded, her expression neutral again. That night, as I stepped into the hallway, I caught her voice, soft but crisp, floating from the study down the hall. The door was cracked. I paused, leaning slightly toward it. She's always been fragile, Clarice murmured. I worry she might hurt herself again. The words sliced through me. Again? I've never had a mental breakdown. Never once been unstable. The careful way she spoke, like she was laying groundwork, like she knew someone else was listening, made my stomach turn. I backed away before she could see me. Upstairs, I opened my laptop and found a notification on my screen. Isolde tagged you in a post. My pulse spiked. I clicked it. It wasn't direct, but it was obvious. Sometimes, mental health is the real family curse, her status read. The post had already racked up sympathetic comments. Harlan's name sat at the top of the likes list. I stared at the screen, cold creeping up my arms. It was deliberate. They were drawing a picture of me as unstable before I had even said a word. Preemptive character assassination. My thumb hovered over the comment box, but I closed the app instead. The next morning, sunlight poured into the guest room like nothing was wrong. I dressed deliberately, my movements slow. Downstairs, Clarice was pouring orange juice, humming. Harlan scrolled his phone. Isolde pretended to be absorbed in a magazine. Are you telling people I'm unstable? I asked, my voice steady. Clarice looked up, eyes wide in mock innocence. I'm just concerned. And I've been advised to document everything. For your own safety. What safety? I asked. Mine or yours? Isolde didn't even look up. We're just trying to protect the family name. I set my coffee down gently. By erasing me? No one answered. Later that day, I found Mavis in the laundry room folding towels, her hands slow and methodical. The room smelled faintly of detergent and warm fabric. Do you think I'm losing it? I asked quietly. Mavis looked up, eyes kind but heavy.
No.
But they're afraid you're remembering everything too clearly. Her words landed with weight. I thanked her and stepped outside. The air was cooler now, a faint breeze cutting across the porch. I walked to my car and drove to the nearest urgent care center. The receptionist raised her eyebrows when I said I wanted a voluntary mental health evaluation. Just to have it on paper, I explained. 2 hours later, I walked out with a signed report in my hand. No signs of psychosis, delusions, or impairment, it read.
Clean. Clear.
Evidence. Back at the house, I printed 3 copies. I left one on the kitchen counter, right next to the fruit bowl. On it, I wrote in thick black marker. Next time you question my mind, do it with facts. Then I picked up my phone and typed out a message to Isolde. This is the last time I'm asking nicely. Back off. The typing bubble appeared instantly. You just drew a line, her reply read. And now we're going to cross it. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the heat rise in my chest. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was fury. Controlled. Directed. I set my phone down, locked my bedroom door, and uploaded my father's voicemail to an encrypted cloud backup. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd be 10 steps ahead. She woke to an email titled, Unusual Activity Detected in Your Bank Account. My eyes opened fully before my brain caught up with the words. The ceiling fan above spun lazily, the room still dim from the morning overcast outside. I sat up slowly, heart knocking against my ribs. That email was waiting like a bruise you hadn't noticed yet. I swung my legs off the bed, grabbed my laptop, and opened my online banking. The login felt slower than usual, like wading through molasses. When my balance finally loaded, a red banner flashed at the top. Account temporarily disabled due to suspicious activity. My breath hissed through my teeth. I clicked details. Someone had attempted to wire nearly all my savings, $25,000, to an account number I didn't recognize. The transaction was flagged, but still pending. The kicker: the request came from my home IP address. I grabbed my phone and dialed the bank's fraud line. After a gauntlet of security questions, a man with a polite, professional voice told me, "We're sorry, Ms. Doyle, but we can't re-enable your account until we complete our investigation. The request appears to have been authorized from one of your registered devices." I wanted to laugh, but the sound would have been too sharp. Instead, I thanked him, hung up, and sat perfectly still. Someone inside this house had moved against me overnight. By mid-morning, I walked downstairs to the kitchen, the smell of coffee and buttered toast thick in the air. Isolde and Clarice were at the table, calm as ever. Harlan wasn't there. "Where's Harlan?" I asked. Clarice smiled faintly. "He had to step out for a quick work call. You know how busy he is."
Busy. Right.
My mind replayed 2 nights ago, Harlan asking to check the weather on my phone, smiling like it was nothing. That same night, I got a login notification from an unknown device. The dots connected like magnets snapping together. I excused myself and headed to the home office. The printer light blinked softly. I clicked recent documents. A wire authorization form appeared on screen, with my digital signature at the bottom. My name, my initials, my email. The account number was the same as the attempted transfer. I leaned closer. It was fake, but chillingly real. They wanted to make me look financially reckless, maybe even criminal. The air in the room pressed against me. I forced myself to breathe evenly. No panic, just data. I snapped pictures of the document, saved them to my encrypted drive, then shut the printer off. That afternoon, I drove to a nearby pharmacy, a mundane errand to keep me moving. On the way back, Mavis caught me at the edge of the driveway. Her eyes darted around, checking to see if anyone was watching. "There's something in your trunk that wasn't there this morning," she whispered. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She just shook her head. "Open it and see." I pressed the trunk release. The lid rose slowly, the smell of heat and old carpet rushing out. Inside sat a clear Ziploc bag stuffed with prescription bottles. One of them had a label with my name, but the font, the spacing, it wasn't right. Forged. I didn't touch it. Instead, I pulled out my phone, photographed everything from 3 angles, then recorded a video of me discovering it. My voice on the recording stayed steady, clinical. I emailed it all to my lawyer friend in Charlotte with a subject line: "Evidence, do not delete." When I straightened, Mavis was still there, wringing her hands. "They're trying to trap you," she said softly. I nodded. "And they just failed." Back inside, I washed my hands slowly, feeling the water slide over my palms like a reset button. Then I opened my laptop and drafted a quick email to Harlan. "Nice try. Next time, try something legal." I didn't hit send yet. I let it sit there, waiting. At 3 p.m., I drove to a notary office downtown. The waiting room smelled of old paper and faint citrus cleaner. When my turn came, I swore a statement under oath documenting everything: the bank account lock, the planted pills, the forged wire form. The notary's eyes widened slightly, but said nothing. She just stamped the page and slid it back to me. Outside, under the bright Georgia sun, I leaned against my car and wrote a short email to Isolde and Clarice. "This is me drawing the second and final line. The next move you make will be your last without consequences." I hit send. Driving back, my hands were steady on the wheel. The radio played an old country song about bridges burning, the chorus soft but relentless. The house loomed ahead, porch light flickering even though it was still daylight. I pulled into the driveway, parked, and stepped out. Something yellow fluttered against the front door. I walked closer. A sticky note, scrawled in thick black marker, waited for me. You started this. I held it between my fingers, the paper trembling slightly though my hand was still. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the porch. The note didn't scare me. It made me ready. I held the sticky paper in my hand, thumb brushing over the words. You started this. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the tone was cold.
Accusatory.
A threat wrapped in faux concern. I stood there for a minute, letting the evening settle in around me. The porch light flickered above, casting uneven shadows across the doorway. Inside, I heard the quiet clink of dishes being loaded into the sink. Isolde, most likely. She always cleaned up when she was trying to look innocent. I stepped back into the house, peeled the note off the door, and slipped it into the front pocket of my jeans. I didn't bother announcing my return. I walked upstairs, locked my door, and sat down at my laptop. The moment I opened my drive, I knew something was wrong. Files were missing, some entirely gone, others scrambled. My folder labeled Dad Docs was empty. I clicked into my sync history and scrolled. Someone had accessed the drive just 30 minutes ago from a device named Harlan iMac. It was him. Again. And this time, he didn't even try to cover his tracks. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I scanned the access logs. It wasn't just deletion. My backup files had been tampered with, renamed, moved, even replaced. A document titled policy_org had been swapped with a version that lacked half the annotations my father and I had painstakingly marked together months before he passed. This wasn't just sabotage. It was a digital erasure. My breath stayed level. I refused to give them what they wanted, a reaction. I minimized the browser and activated the emergency recovery system I'd installed back in Charlotte, back when I still believed protecting other people's data was the most important thing I'd ever do. Tonight, I was my own client. I connected to my off-grid server, an old, secure archive only 2 people knew existed, me and Mitch, my cybersecurity friend. Within minutes, my files began restoring themselves. The real versions, not the edited lies they'd tried to replace them with. While the recovery ran in the background, I triggered the honeypot I'd set up earlier. A fake file titled final_statement_to_police, PDF. Harmless on the surface, but rigged to track every keystroke, every screenshot, every time it was opened or forwarded. Bait on a silver platter. Let's see who bites. Hours passed with a quiet hum of machines filling the silence. I leaned back in my chair and picked up my old phone, the one I hadn't used in almost a year. Its screen was cracked, battery bloated, but it still powered on. Inside the voicemail archive, buried beneath months of ignored messages, I found it. A message from Isolde, dated 9 months ago. I pressed play. Her voice trembled, rushed, like she was calling in a moment of panic. Aaron, I don't know what to do. If this gets out, the life insurance, the policy was altered. It was never meant for public filing. It was just supposed to be temporary until things were stabilized. You can't tell anyone, okay? I sat frozen. There it was. Proof. Clear, unfiltered, unmistakably her voice. The panic. The confession. The intention. She hadn't just tweaked a policy or fudged a few numbers. She'd altered the legal designation of a multi-$100,000 policy to benefit herself. And she'd admitted it.
To me.
She probably thought I'd deleted the message. Or that I'd forgotten. Or maybe she hoped my silence meant consent. But silence is not approval. It's just a waiting room for the truth. I uploaded the voicemail to my encrypted cloud vault and labeled it voiceproof_1_Isolde. Then I texted her. No caption. No comment. Just the audio file. She replied within 3 minutes. A knock sounded at my bedroom door 5 minutes after that. Aaron, she called softly. Her voice syrupy, laced with false concern. I didn't answer. Another knock. Can we talk? Please. I stood, opened the door halfway. She was alone, arms crossed tightly, smile brittle. You don't want this to go public, she said quietly. We can fix this. Quietly. No lawyers, no drama. Just family. I tilted my head. It became public the moment you made me the enemy. Her expression didn't shift, but her eyes flashed. Just for a second. Then she nodded, stepped back, and disappeared down the hall. I shut the door. For the next 2 hours, I worked. I built a folder titled Case Package. Inside, I dropped the voicemail, screenshots of the fake document Harlan printed, photos of the planted pills, logs of cloud access attempts, and copies of the notary-certified statement I filed earlier that day. I even included the sticky note from the front door, scanned, cataloged, time-stamped. Then I opened my contact list and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Nora Becker? I asked when she picked up. The one and only, she replied, her voice husky and sharp.
Who's this?
Aaron Doyle. I have a story for your podcast. That got her attention. You mean the one that outs corrupt CEOs and religious nonprofits? I don't usually do family drama. This isn't drama, I said. It's financial fraud, biometric data theft, and insurance manipulation. And it's all verifiable. A long pause. Then, send me what you have. I'll call you back. I did. At 1 a.m., just as I was closing my laptop, someone knocked on my window. Not the door. The window. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and approached slowly. The curtain fluttered slightly with the breeze. My thumb hovered over the 911 icon. Then I saw him. Harlan. His hair was a mess, his eyes bloodshot, shirt wrinkled. He looked like a man unraveling from the inside. I cracked the window. You need to stop, he whispered, before someone gets hurt. My voice was calm.
Someone already has.
I opened the door, not because I trusted Harlan, but because I was done running. He stood there, slouched and sweaty, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was rumpled, and the nervous twitch in his jaw gave him away before he spoke. You need to stop, he murmured, voice low, barely meeting my eyes. Before someone gets hurt. I let the silence stretch. You mean me? I asked. He shifted. I mean all of us. My expression didn't change. I watched him squirm, watched the crack show, and then I closed the door. Not slammed, just shut. Decisive. The next morning was quieter than usual. I made coffee before anyone else was up. The kitchen felt foreign now, like a stranger had arranged it to look like home. I sat at the table, scrolling through my email, when the doorbell rang. Clarice called out from upstairs. Can you get that, Aaron? Of course. I opened the door to find a courier, holding a thick envelope. Delivery for Isolde Doyle, he said. I hesitated. I'll make sure she gets it. He handed it over, turned and left. No clipboard to sign. No question of ID. Just hand it off like it meant nothing. I took the envelope inside and placed it on the kitchen counter, but something about it nagged at me. It was heavy. I checked the return address. A law firm in Macon. Something in me cracked. I opened it. Inside were documents, legal, notarized, stamped. A recent amendment to my father's will. Not the one I remembered. Not the version he and I had reviewed together months before his death. This version had only 2 beneficiaries, Isolde and Harlan. My name wasn't on it. According to the timeline, the change had been made 1 month after he passed. I sat down hard on the stool, the papers fanned across the counter like a crime scene. My father had already been gone when this was signed. The signature looked like his, but I knew his handwriting better than anyone. This wasn't his. They tried to bury me legally. I stared at the papers until the letters blurred. My name wasn't even in the footnotes. It was like I never existed. No more waiting. I sent a message to the group chat that had long gone dormant. Let's meet in the dining room. 1 hour. Everyone. When I walked in at exactly 10 o'clock, they were already there, Isolde seated in her usual chair at the head of the table, Clarice to her right, Harlan to the left. It was almost nostalgic, if you ignored the betrayal thick in the air. I took the seat across from them and placed the envelope on the table. I opened this by accident, I said. Thought it was mine. No one spoke. Oops, I added, sliding the pages across to Isolde. Looks like I wasn't supposed to see this. Clarice's brows drew together. What is that? Isolde scanned the front page and didn't blink. It's legal. Harlan kept his eyes down. I looked at Clarice. You knew. She faltered. It was meant to protect the family. Your father he would have. No. I cut her off.
He wouldn't have.
And you know it. Isolde leaned back in her chair, her voice casual. You were always the outsider, Aaron. Don't act surprised. You left. We stayed. And you erased me. She shrugged. We adjusted. I raised my wrist slightly. The watch looked ordinary, sleek, modern. They didn't know it was recording. Say that again, I said. Isolde's eyes narrowed. What? I looked directly at her. Say, I was always the outsider. Her lips curled into a smirk. You were. I tapped the side of the watch. And now, the world hears that from you directly. Clarice went pale. You recorded this? You're damn right I did. The room exploded. Clarice shouted something about privacy. Harlan finally spoke, something about we can talk this out, but I didn't listen. I pulled out my phone, opened the encrypted drive, and hit send. Within minutes, the entire file package, voice recordings, video, documents, timestamps, was sent to my attorney and the Georgia probate court. I stood and slid the smartwatch into a padded envelope addressed to the district attorney. Before I could leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Nora Becker, the podcast lawyer who specialized in family corruption cases. Got it. Going live this Friday. Part 1. Sisterhood, Inheritance, and Poison Soup. That night, a sheriff's deputy came to the house. Not for me. Isolde was arrested for insurance fraud, animal tampering. Clarice wasn't charged, but was issued a formal investigation notice. Harlan stayed silent through it all. By 9 p.m., I was alone in the living room. The walls felt taller. The pictures had been taken down, whether by choice or by instinct, I didn't know. I stood in front of the last remaining photo of my father, framed on a side table. I kept the promise, I whispered. I didn't disappear. My phone lit up. Mavis is on her way over. She's bringing pie. I lit a single candle on the kitchen table. Not for light. We had plenty of that now, with the evening skies slowly bleeding into the windows. But for presence. For quiet.
For peace.
And for the first time in that house, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It didn't echo with tension or threat. It was just silence. My own. I left the candle burning as I moved to the living room and turned on the television. Every major local channel had the same headline in different fonts. Woman uncovers family plot, with soup and surveillance. The segment played over B-roll of Isolde being led into the courthouse, wrists bound, sunglasses on, jaw set like stone. I watched without flinching. She'd always known how to perform. That's what made her so dangerous. They played the voice clip from the watch recording, her admission, her tone when she said, "You were always the outsider." The anchor followed up with the phrase, chilling insight into a family gone toxic. Clarice had avoided the cameras entirely, though one reporter claimed she was served a legal injunction preventing her from accessing any estate accounts pending a full investigation. Harlan had apparently stepped down from his law firm. For personal reasons, the release said. There was no victory parade, no family apology, just the slow, steady sound of consequences settling into place. Later that day, I received a knock at the door. When I opened it, Mrs. Delaney, the neighbor across the street, the one with the twin Yorkies, stood there holding an envelope and a nervous smile. "I thought you should know," she said, handing it to me. "They might ask me to testify, so I gave my statement already. I figured you deserved to hear it directly." Inside the envelope was a printed email. Her words in black and white. Clarice told me she was going to change everything. Said Aaron didn't have what it takes to carry the family name. Said she was too independent-minded for the legacy her father left behind. I read it twice, then looked up. "Thank you." She patted my hand. "I never believed them, sweetheart. Not for a second." I sent her flowers the next morning. 2 days later, the podcast episode aired. Titled Sisterhood, Inheritance, and Poison Soup, it played the voicemail, spliced with interviews and expert commentary. But the part that went viral wasn't the legal documents or the family drama. It was a clip pulled from the Alexa device in the kitchen, one I'd forgotten was even running during that disastrous breakfast. "If she doesn't drink it," Isolde's voice said in the background, "we'll try something else." Simple. Chilling. Recorded without intention. That sentence became a meme almost overnight. TikTok edits, parody clips, even merch. I didn't laugh at any of them. But I did listen to it once. Alone. Just to remind myself I hadn't imagined it all. That the nightmare I lived through was real. I whispered, "Thank you for catching what I couldn't." The world had finally heard what I never could say out loud without being called unstable. That evening, the doorbell rang again. Mavis. She stood there in her usual way, calm and kind, holding a foil-covered dish in her hands. "I made pie," she said simply. "Didn't know what else to bring." We sat together on the porch, the late summer air settling around us. No need for words at first. Just two women sitting in the space between what was lost and what was reclaimed. After a while, she looked at me and said, "Your daddy would have been proud. You didn't scream. You proved." I felt my throat tighten, but I nodded. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it so it wouldn't happen again. "You did good," she said. "You did real good." The next morning, I started packing. Not frantically, not to flee, but deliberately. I was leaving Atlanta, not because I was scared, but because I was ready to live somewhere I didn't have to defend my own name. I booked a one-way flight to Denver, a city where nobody knew me as the difficult sister or the one who made everything complicated. Just Aaron. Before I left, I visited my father's grave one last time. The grass was trimmed, the stone clean. I knelt down and traced his name with my fingers. "They said I was the broken one," I whispered. "Turns out, I was the only one not pretending." I didn't cry. Not there. I stood, brushed off my jeans, and walked away. My new apartment was small, bright, and smelled faintly of fresh paint. I unpacked slowly, careful with the boxes. When I hung the last picture on the wall, one of me as a child holding my father's hand, I stepped back and stared at it for a long time.
No edits.
No crops. This time, I get to be in the picture. Always. Sometimes, the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who raised you, loved you, and smiled across the dinner table. But silence isn't safety. And being the quiet one doesn't mean you're powerless. So, here's the question. If your family tried to erase you, would you let them? Or would you fight to be seen, heard, and remembered? If this story hit close to home, leave a comment and tell me how you reclaimed your voice. And don't forget to subscribe.